The dusty corner of memory theaters, a quiet kind of ache that lives in old places. It's not the kind that screams or demands attention, but the kind that hides in chipped paint and creaky steps and smells faintly of rust and bleach. It had been 30 years since Sundar Pichai last stepped into his old school in Chennai, and the moment he walked through the faded front gate, that ache greeted him like a ghost from another life. The visit wasn't planned. Sundar was in India for a tech summit in Delhi. Every minute of his schedule was accounted for, neatly typed out in the assistant's digital planner. But on the flight in, somewhere over the Indian Ocean, a random memory had floated up in his mind, an image of a mop swaying across a dusty hallway, the sound of water splashing into a rusty bucket, and a man with a kind, wrinkled face humming an old Tamil song under his breath. He hadn't thought about that man in decades. He was just the janitor back then. Nobody really knew his name, and if they did, they never used it. He was simply uncle to some, cleaner to most. Back when he was just a skinny teenager with oversized glasses and a head full of impossible dreams, that man had been something more. He was the only adult in the school who ever asked Sundar if he was okay. He once shared his lunch rice and pickle in a metal tiffin box when Sundar forgot his own. And he had a way of appearing just when Sundar needed a moment of quiet comfort. They never talked much, but the silence between them was always warm. So after Sundar's final keynote in Delhi, he made a sudden decision. He canceled his remaining meetings, ignored the dozen phone calls from his team, and flew to Chennai without telling anyone. No media, no cameras. Just him, his driver, and a heart that felt heavier than usual. The school hadn't changed much. Some walls had new paint, sure, but the bones were the same. The main corridor still smelled of chalk and ink, and the courtyard still had that old neem tree that bent like it was whispering secrets to the earth. Sundar walked slowly, his shoes echoing softly on the concrete floor. A few teachers recognized him. They smiled, waved. Some even tried to take photos, but he gently declined. Well, this visit wasn't for them. He was halfway down the science wing, peeking into classrooms that once felt like cages and now felt impossibly small when he heard it. The squeak of a mop. He froze, turned his head slowly. And there he was, an old man bent at the spine like the crescent moon, his hands gripping the mop like it weighed more than it used to. His white shirt was stained at the sleeves, and his trousers looked a size too big. But the face, that face-it, was unmistakable. It was him, the janitor. Sundar stood there, unmoving. For a moment, he wasn't the CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. He was just a boy again. He watched as the man dipped the mop into the bucket, then began to hum the same old song. His voice was weaker now, raspier, like time had sanded the edges down. Sundar took a step forward, then another. His voice caught in his throat, thick with a sudden wave of emotion. "Uncle," he said, almost in a whisper. The man stopped. He looked up confused at first, then curious. His eyes squinted, trying to place the face before him. "Sundar," he said slowly. His voice filled with disbelief, and then something happened that neither of them expected. The old man dropped the mop, and tears began rolling down his cheeks. He shuffled forward, arms trembling, and embraced Sundar in a way that made time collapse. It didn't matter that Sundar wore an expensive suit. It didn't matter that he had just been on stage in front of thousands of tech leaders. Right now, he was just a student coming home. "I thought you forgot us," the old man said, his voice cracking like old wood. "Never," Sundar whispered. "Never you." They sat on a bench near the courtyard after that. The old man, whose name was Murugan, offered him a cup of chai from a thermos he carried with him. Sundar took it with both hands, grateful not just for the tea, but for the grounding it offered. Murugan told him stories about how the school changed, about the kids now who didn't greet elders like they used to, about how his legs hurt more these days, and how sometimes he fell asleep standing up. He laughed when he said it, but there was something in his laugh that wasn't funny at all. "Why are you still working?" Sundar asked quietly. Murugan shrugged. "Who else will do it? And I need the money, my son." He lost his job during the pandemic. Now he drives an auto. Barely enough for his family. I don't want to be a burden. Sundar didn't respond, just looked at his tea and swallowed hard. A janitor, 80 years old, still scrubbing floors, still trying to carry the weight of a family that had forgotten how heavy it was. And here he was, Sundar Pichai, a man whose name echoed in every tech conference, who lived in a house where even the refrigerator was smarter than most people. How had he not known? How had he let this happen? Murugan suddenly chuckled, breaking the silence. But you came back, Sundar. I always knew you would. You always had kind eyes. Sundar looked up. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. But he didn't say it aloud. Not yet, because some promises are too sacred to make with words. As the sun dipped below the neem tree, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Sundar stood up. I'll see you tomorrow, uncle, he said. Why are you coming back? Sundar smiled, but there was something different in his eyes now. A storm gathering behind calm waters. Yes, and not just to visit. He walked away before Murugan could ask what he meant. That night, Sundar sat alone in his hotel room, staring out at the Chennai skyline. Lights blinked in the distance, and his phone buzzed with messages from board members, reporters, and assistants. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened a blank document on his laptop. At the top, he typed in lowercase, like a whisper into the universe. Project Morigani stared at the words for a long time. Then he began to type fast, like he couldn't afford to slow down. Like every second mattered, because the truth was, it did. And what he was planning, what he was about to do, would leave everyone speechless. But no one, not even Sundar, could predict just how far it would go. The plan no one saw coming next morning. Chennai woke up to its usual chaos, rickshaws zigzagging through honking cars, tea stalls steaming like little volcanoes on every street corner, and children in wrinkled uniforms racing toward schools they didn't want to go to, but somewhere in a hotel suite high above the noise, Sundar Pichai had already been awake for hours. Not because of jet lag, not because of some urgent email, but because something inside him wouldn't let him sleep. It was Murugan's hands. Not just the way they trembled as he poured chai, but the way they were still trying to serve, still trying to matter. Even when the world had long stopped noticing them, Sundar had spent most of the night sketching an idea. At first, it was just a few scribbled thoughts. Then diagrams. Then spreadsheets. Then calls, discreet ones, to people he trusted, people who didn't blink when he asked for favors that made no sense yet. And when the sun finally slipped into the room through the curtains, golden and indifferent, Sundar was staring at something. More than a plan, it was a blueprint for something bigger than tech. By the time he arrived back at the school, Murugan was already there, pushing a broom across the staff room like it still mattered whether dust lived under the desk. He looked up, surprised but pleased. Sundar didn't wear his usual suit today. Instead, he wore a plain white shirt, loose-fitting pants, and shoes that had clearly seen too many meetings. It wasn't about appearances. It was about respect. And maybe in some small way, it was also about penance. You're early, Murugan said, smiling, though his eyes scanned Sundar's face like he was trying to read something hidden in it. So are you, Sundar replied. Walking beside him, they moved through the hallways like that for a while, side by side. One man cleaning dust, the other trying to clean up his own regrets. Finally, Sundar stopped. I need to talk to the principal, he said. What for? You'll see. The principal's office still had that same old chair with the squeaky wheels and the dusty portrait of Mahatma Gandhi above the window. The man who sat behind the desk now was newer, younger, with a trimmed mustache and a suspicious look in his eyes. Sundar introduced himself, and the man's expression shifted from cautious curiosity to wide-eyed panic. Apparently, nobody had warned him that Sundar Pichai was on campus. I'm not here for press, Sundar said gently. And I'm not here to make speeches. I'm here because of Murugan. The principal blinked. The janitor?
Oh.
Sundar said firmly. The man who has held this school together longer than most of us have been alive. What followed was a conversation that rewired the entire rhythm of that office. Sundar wasn't angry. He didn't raise his voice. But every word carried the quiet weight of someone who didn't believe in letting good people be forgotten. He asked for Murugan's employment history, his salary, his retirement plan, which as it turned out didn't exist. Asked how many janitors worked at the school, how often they rotated shifts. With each answer, Sundar's expression grew tighter, more focused on when he left the office. Something had shifted. He didn't tell Murugan what was coming. Not yet. Instead, he asked him for a favor. Can you meet me tonight at this address? He handed Murugan a card. Simple, white, with a handwritten note. Murugan frowned. Is this ... serious? Deadly, Sundar smiled. That evening, Murugan arrived at a quiet co-working space nestled between two shuttered textile shops. He walked in slowly, a little confused by the neon lights and beanbag chairs, and even more confused when he saw Sundar standing there with three strangers, two women, and one man all in their 30s, all typing furiously on laptops. Uncle Murugan, Sundar said warmly, waving him over. Welcome to the headquarters of something very important. What is this? Murugan asked, his brow furrowed. This, Sundar said, is the beginning of your legacy. The three strangers looked up and smiled. One of them, a woman with round glasses and a kind face, stood and offered Murugan a chair. We've started building a project, Sundar explained. Foundation. It's named after you. Its mission is simple: to ensure that no school worker in India ever retires in poverty again. Murugan's mouth opened slightly. He didn't speak. You see, uncle, Sundar continued, you are not just a janitor. You're proof that the heart of any institution is the person who gives quietly, without applause. And I've realized the tech world isn't the only place where innovation belongs. Sometimes it belongs on the ground, in the dust, where people like you have been standing for decades, holding everything up. Murugan finally managed a word. Why, Sundars? The answer was soft but sharp like lightning. Because I didn't get here alone. Because it's time the world remembers the people who lifted us when we were too small to lift ourselves. Murugan looked around at the young people building this digital fortress in his name. It was too much. Too fast. Too unreal. But I'm nobody, he whispered. Then so am I, Sundar replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward. It's just heavy. With the kind of awe that fills a space when something important is born. What? Murugan didn't know what none of them knew, was that Sundar had already wired a large sum of money into the foundation's account. Enough to fund pensions for hundreds of school workers. And that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, more would come from former students, from tech giants, from people across the globe who didn't even know Murugan's name but believed in what he represented. But there was one thing Sundar hadn't prepared for. Something. Not even his data models could predict. And it was coming faster than he realized. Because when you shine a light in a quiet place, you don't just attract the good, you attract everything. The ripple nobody expected at first. It was beautiful. Within 2 weeks, Murugan Foundation had gone from an idea on a hotel room laptop to a living, breathing force. Sundar watched in awe as the website launched. Donations trickled in, then surged, and testimonials flooded the inbox from people who had never spoken to a janitor before. Suddenly realizing how much they owed to the silent figures in the hallways of their youth, there were letters from former students who remembered their own school cleaners, from nurses who remembered hospital sweepers who stayed late, from retired teachers who had nothing but praise for the people who kept the school running while everyone else took credit. The story had gone viral. Someone had snapped a photo of Murugan sitting next to Sundar under the neem tree and posted it online with a caption so simple, it cracked hearts wide open. He still remembers the man who cleaned his classroom. In under 48 hours, the image had more than 10 million views. The real storm hadn't even begun. Murugan became an accidental celebrity. Local news channels begged for interviews. Some even offered money, which he always refused. A news crew showed up to the school without warning, filming him while he swept the floor, trying to catch the magic without realizing how much dignity they were trampling. Murugan didn't understand the frenzy, just wanted to keep doing his job. But now, every time he picked up his mop, 5 people asked if he needed help. while 3 more tried to take selfies. "They're treating me like a monument," he whispered one day to Sundar, half amused, half afraid. Sundar smiled, but his stomach tightened.
Right.
And when something becomes loud, it starts attracting noise, not just music. The first signs of trouble came in whispers. Government official quietly reached out, asking questions about the foundation's finances. Harmless on the surface, but the tone was off too polite, too curious. Then, a former trustee from the school board claimed that the idea for the foundation was originally his, and he had proof scribbled in an old diary no one could find. A columnist accused Sundar of using Murugan's story as a publicity stunt to distract from layoffs at Google earlier that year, twisting kindness into conspiracy like it was sport. But the worst came from somewhere closer. A young journalist from a digital magazine, sharp and hungry for attention, published an article that shook everything. The headline hit hard: "The Janitor, the CEO, and the Secret He Tried to Bury." The piece wasn't just about the foundation. It dug deep into Murugan's past, too deep. The journalist had traced Murugan's family and found a distant cousin who claimed Murugan had once abandoned a child. The details were murky, the timeline messy, but the story caught fire. Suddenly, the internet wasn't just applauding, it was tearing. Comment sections turned poisonous. People who had never met Murugan started questioning his character. Donations slowed. A school parent anonymously demanded Murugan be suspended until the allegations were cleared. Someone even graffitied the school gate one morning with red paint. Liars wear kind faces too. Murugan didn't say much. He just moved slower. Didn't hum while he worked anymore. He stopped bringing his lunch in the shiny steel box. His eyes looked lost, like he had forgotten which way was home. Sundar, for the first time in months, felt helpless. He tried to fight back. Published a statement defending Murugan. Hired a lawyer to challenge the claims. Offered Murugan time off, a vacation even, something to let the storm pass. But Murugan refused. "I've cleaned messes all my life, Sundar," he said softly. "This one is just louder." And then he said something Sundar would never forget. "When people throw mud at you, don't waste time cleaning your clothes. Just keep walking. Let the rain do the rest." But there was a problem. The rain wasn't coming, and something darker was approaching. Because in one of those endless meetings with the legal team, someone uncovered a detail Sundar hadn't seen. A transaction, small, unassuming, but out of place. An anonymous donation, large, untraceable, that had been routed into the Murugan Foundation's account just 2 days before the smear campaign began. It wasn't from a known supporter. It wasn't from a fan. And the digital fingerprint on it was blurred. It's intentional. Someone wanted to be seen helping, but only so they could stay close. "This isn't just hate," one of the lawyers said. "Someone's trying to hijack what you're building." Stared at the screen, at the numbers glowing back at him like a riddle. He knew this game. Manipulation. Hidden hands. He'd seen it in tech, in boardrooms, in billion-dollar negotiations, but he never expected to see it here. Not in something it's built from love. Not in Murugan's name. He looked out the window. The sky was dark, heavy with monsoon clouds, but no rain yet. Just that strange stillness before something breaks. Then he stood up, closed his laptop, and said the words that sent a chill through the room. "We're going to find out who's behind this." "How?" someone asked. He didn't answer, because he already knew. He would go back to where it all started, not to the school, but to Murugan's past, not as a CEO, but as a student again, and he was ready to learn everything, even if it broke him. The shadow under the fourth train ride was longer than it needed to be. Sundar could have taken a car or even chartered a flight, but he chose the train. He wanted the hum, the window rattles, the chai vendors calling out every 15 minutes. He wanted time to think, to listen, and maybe to prepare for the version of Murugan that no one had talked about, not even Murugan himself. The destination was a village about 6 hours outside Chennai, small enough to not exist on most digital maps, but big enough to still hold pieces of the past. Murugan was born there, Sundar had found it mentioned once, in a torn school record, back when they still wrote in ink, and errors couldn't be deleted with a click. The village was called Aranthangal. Even the name felt like it carried dust. When Sundar stepped off the train, the platform looked like it hadn't aged well. Paint peeled like sunburnt skin. The trees around it stood like tired witnesses. A boy offered to carry his bag, and Sundar smiled, letting him. Sometimes letting someone help you is its own kind of humility. The house wasn't hard to find. Old houses have a way of staying visible even when the people inside them have disappeared. It stood at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by broken fences and overgrown hibiscus. An old woman sat at the doorway, threading jasmine flowers with fingers so thin they looked like folded paper. When Sundar introduced himself and said Murugan's name, her eyes changed. Not surprised, not angry, just tired. "Murugan," she said, her voice dry. "You mean the one who left?" Sundar nodded slowly. The woman turned her face away, not unkindly, but like she'd just heard an old song she didn't want to remember. "He was my brother-in-law," she said. "Used to live here with my husband. Then one day he just left. No note, no goodbye, just silence." Sundar waited, not wanting to interrupt whatever memory she was falling into. "We didn't know where he went." She continued. "He was young, quiet, kind. Yes, but always looking somewhere far away, like he was never fully in the room. And then there was the boy." The words landed like a dropped plate. Sundar leaned forward. "What boy?" She hesitated, looked him over again. This time, there was something harder in her stare. "He had a son," she said. "None of us knew the woman. She was from another town. We only saw her once. The boy was maybe 3 when she died. Murugan couldn't handle it, gave the child to her family and left. We tried writing. He never replied. A son." Sundar felt his breath slow. This wasn't the story he knew. He thanked the woman gently, gave her his number, and promised to visit again. She didn't say yes or no, just nodded and went back to her jasmine. On the ride back to Chennai, Sundar didn't sleep. He watched the trees flick past the window like frames of an unfinished film. In his mind, the image of Murugan wasn't crumbling, it was becoming more human, a janitor, a father, a runaway. The next few days were filled with quiet investigations. He traced the boy's last known family. It's not easy. Old phone numbers, crumbling records, silent relatives. Finally, a thread led him to a small town near Madurai, where a man named Ravi worked at a bus depot. Sundar arrived unannounced. Ravi was 34, tall, with a jaw that looked permanently clenched. When Sundar explained why he was there, Ravi didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't do anything at first. Then slowly he said, "So he remembers me now?" The words were like metal. "He didn't forget," Sundar said gently. "He just couldn't come back." Ravi laughed, not kindly, not cruelly either. Just the laugh of someone who's had a wound so long he stopped checking if it was still bleeding. He chose to leave. People always say they were scared or broken or whatever, but they still make a choice. Sundar didn't argue. He knew the truth wasn't one side or the other. The truth lived in the gap between two silences. He sat with Ravi a long time. Learned that he was raised by his mother's sister. Learned that he always wondered where his father went. Learned that when the viral photo of Murugan and Sundar appeared online, he recognized the man instantly, and did nothing. "I wanted to see if he'd reach out," Ravi said. He didn't. Then, after a pause, "Tell him he doesn't owe me anything. But also tell him I'm not angry anymore. I don't know why. I'm tired of holding it." The bus depot was noisy. A horn blew somewhere close. Sundar stood up, thanked Ravi, and started walking back to the car. Halfway down the street, he turned around and shouted, "He still hums when he works." Ravi blinked, then nodded. Just once, back in Chennai, Sundar returned to the school. Murugan was there, sitting under the neem tree, not working, just sitting. Hands clasped, staring at the kids in the courtyard. His body looked smaller, like something invisible was pressing down on him. "I met him," Sundar said, sitting beside him. Murugan didn't flinch. "I figured," he said. "You move like a man chasing shadows. He's doing okay. He doesn't hate you." Murugan nodded, but the tears came anyway. Not loud, just there, falling down old skin like they'd been waiting years to be allowed out. "I didn't know how to be a father," Murugan whispered. "I didn't even know how to be a whole person." Sundar didn't try to fix the silence that followed, because some silences aren't broken, they're honored. Later that evening, Sundar made a call. Not to a board member. Not to the press. He called Ravi. "Would you be willing?" Sundar asked carefully, "To meet him?" Just breath. Then Ravi replied, and what he said changed everything. When silence speaks louder than apologize, meeting didn't happen in a temple or a hospital or some dramatic stage set by fate. It happened in the staff tea room. A place that smelled faintly of cardamom, old biscuits, and chalk dust. A place where broken fans spun slowly, like they were thinking too hard. Sundar had chosen it on purpose. No cameras. No ceremonial chairs. Just an old wooden table to steal cups of chai. And a small plate of leftover pakoras someone forgot to claim. Murugan arrived first. He wore a freshly pressed shirt, buttoned all the way up, as if trying to protect his heart from spilling out. Too soon, his hands fidgeted, then stopped, and fidgeted again. Kept checking the clock on the wall, though it didn't work. Hadn't worked in years. Just sat there, stuck at 11:48. Like even time wasn't sure how to move forward in. This room, Ravi walked in 5 minutes later. No dramatic entrance, no slow-motion music playing in the background. Just a tired man walking into a quiet room, holding the weight of too many unanswered questions. Their eyes met. Just that. And for a moment, the room held its breath. No one spoke first. Not because they didn't have words, but because words felt. Too small, too clumsy. How do you summarize years of distance? How do you fold decades of confusion, pain, guilt, and missed birthdays into a single sentence? Murugan stood up, then sat down again. Then finally he said, "You have your mother's eyes." Ravi nodded. "So I've been told." Murugan swallowed. The kind of swallow people do when they're holding back things that don't fit in the throat. "I'm not here to defend myself," he said. "I'm just grateful you came." Ravi didn't respond immediately. He picked up the chai, sipped, then placed it back down. "I used to imagine this moment a lot," he said. "When I was younger, I thought maybe you were a spy or a monk or dead. Now I know you were just a man who didn't know what to do." Murugan looked down at his hands. "I was scared," he said. "It's not of being a father, but of failing you in ways I couldn't fix. So I disappeared. It was cowardly, and I regret it every day." "I'm not here for regret," Ravi said, voice low. "I'm here for closure." And then he did something that even surprised himself. He reached into his bag and pulled out an old photograph. Faded edges curled. A little boy on a bicycle, probably 4, maybe 5. "I kept this," Ravi said. "It was the only photo of us. We were holding the bike. I don't remember that day. But sometimes, when things were hard, I'd stare at this and tell myself, someone held me once." Murugan's breath caught in his chest, like it had nowhere else to go. He reached out, but didn't take the photo. Instead, he said, "I remember. That day, your legs were too short to pedal, but you wanted to ride anyway." Ravi smiled. "Small, sad figures," he said. "Still trying to go places before I'm ready." There was a long pause, and then something fragile unfolded between them. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something close. Sundar, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, not wanting to interrupt, finally stepped forward. He handed each of them a small card. On it was the official announcement of the Murugan Foundation's first public initiative, Project Roots, a mentorship program connecting school staff with students across India, creating stories that would never again go untold. "We start next month," Sundar said. "But it starts here with both of you." Murugan looked up, eyes shimmering. Ravi tilted his head. "Mentorship?" You've both lived through things most people wouldn't survive, Sundar replied. That makes you experts in something. Priceless. The tea room clock still said 11:48, but somehow time had moved anyway. The next few days were strange. The media storm cooled slowly, like tea left untouched. Someone published a counter-article defending Murugan, gained traction. Donations to the foundation returned. Students wrote thank you notes. Former janitors came out of retirement to help build the program. Even the school principal once skeptical offered to host a launch event. But Murugan? He stayed the same, still cleaned the floors, still hummed old songs. But now? Sometimes Ravi showed up after work, sitting beside him in the courtyard, sharing food stories, silence, and for Sundar. Something inside shifted permanently, because he had spent most of his life solving problems with logic, algorithms, and roadmaps. But this wasn't about fixing. It was about showing up again and again, even when you're scared, even when it hurts, especially then. One evening, folded itself into dusk, Murugan handed Sundar a piece of folded paper. On it, a hand-drawn map. Not digital. Not precise. Just a trail. What's this? Sundar asked. Murugan looked at him, face calm. A place I haven't gone in 50 years, he said. But maybe it's time. You coming? Sundar didn't. Even ask where, he just said. Always. 'Cause some journeys don't need a destination, just the right person to walk beside you. The place where things begin, a Ganthy left before sunrise. No fanfare. No security. No interviews lined up. Just Sundar and Murugan in an old ambassador car that smelled faintly of dust and coconut oil. It's a kind that seems to come baked into. The fabric after decades of India's weather pressing in from all sides. Ravi wasn't with them, he had offered, but Murugan had said, not this time. This one's for old ghosts. The map wasn't long, but the road made it feel like it was. They passed sugarcane fields, empty train crossings, children walking, barefoot to schools that looked like they were built from leftover memories.
Oh.
Murugan kept looking out the window, his face unreadable, but not empty. It was the face of a man who had spent years building walls, now finally walking toward the place where he buried the door. The village was almost gone. Only 3 houses still had people in them. The others were just shapes, memories wrapped in. Broken bricks. Goats wandered through courtyards that once held weddings. Trees had grown over fences like they'd decided boundaries were no longer necessary. Murugan led Sundar through a narrow path, then stopped at a crumbling house with a faded green door. This was where I learned to leave things, he said. They stepped inside. Silence greeted them, not as absence, but as presence. It's a kind of silence that speaks only to those who have earned the right to hear it. There was nothing to save in the house, nothing to clean. But Murugan walked through it slowly, touching walls, looking at corners, pausing where sunlight spilled through broken tiles. And then in the back they found it an old box. Inside it, a small wooden toy. A slingshot, and a rusted photo frame with no photo. Murugan held it like it was fragile. I was saving this for him, he said, meaning Ravi. But time stole the picture. Sundar said nothing. Some moments don't need responses, just witness. They buried the box under the neem tree outside, not as a funeral, but as a release. Murugan said a prayer. It's not loud, not rehearsed. Just breath and memory and soil. Then he stood up straighter than Sundar had ever seen him stand. I think I'm ready now, he said. Ready for what? Murugan didn't say, but the world seemed to understand. The following weeks moved fast. Project. Routes launched across multiple states. Volunteers signed up in numbers Sundar hadn't predicted. Janitors, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, all coming forward not just to be helped, but to mentor, to be seen, to tell their stories. Murugan spoke at the first event. From the floor, sitting cross-legged with the students, he told them stories of leaky ceilings and stubborn stains, and how kindness, like soap, works best when applied consistently. No flashy quotes, no viral moments. It's just a man who had spent 80 years mopping floors and now, finally, was being listened to. Ravi was there. Sitting in the back, he didn't cry. He just nodded, again and again. Afterward, he helped clean up the chairs. Quietly, the foundation received funding from unexpected places. A retired cricket player donated his final match salary. A tech startup pledged a portion of every sale. An anonymous benefactor, later revealed to be a former dropout, wrote a check large enough to fund schools across 2 districts. But the most surprising thing? Other countries called, asked how to build their own versions. The Mukun's name, Murugan, became a word whispered in classrooms far from Chennai, a symbol not of poverty, not of pity, but of dignity. One night, Sundar and Murugan sat outside. The school again, same bench, same neem tree. Kids played nearby. Someone was painting the outer wall with a mural of school workers holding hands with students. Sundar had nothing planned to say, and that's why the moment worked. "You've changed the world," he said. Murugan smiled. "No," he said. "You just gave it a reason to notice." Pause. Then he turned to Sundar and asked, almost as a joke, "So what are you going to do now? You built Google, saved an old janitor, fixed my family, and launched a foundation." Sundar looked up at the sky. The stars were brighter than usual, he said. "I think I'm going to listen more." Murugan chuckled. "Finally learning from a janitor, eh? The best kind of teacher," Sundar replied. And then, as if the universe needed to wrap things just a little neater, the broken school clock, the one that had been stuck at 11:48 for years, ticked once, then twice, then started moving again. Nobody noticed, except Murugan. He looked at it, smiled softly, then looked away. Because sometimes healing is quiet, and sometimes the loudest victories happen in rooms no one is filming. And in that moment, it was clear this wasn't a story about a tech CEO, or a janitor, or even a school. This was a story about how the smallest acts, remembered, honored, passed on, can echo longer than empires, and how sometimes going back is the only way to move forward. The end.